So first and foremost, I'm a 27-year-old female, I'm about 5 foot nothing, and I love Halloween. I'm not exactly pretty or nicely shaped, so I don't do the whole sexy Halloween, but rather, I dress up to be scary. I love scaring people and then watching them realize what happened and start laughing. The fun kind of scaring. I tell you this so you understand how this whole strange happening came to be. So, like I said, I love Halloween, so I usually help out at haunted houses or at other friends' places, scaring older kids coming up to get candy. This all took place last year. I was helping make some new props for a haunted house that a family has, and since it's a large production, the ones who are there helping usually go down there a week ahead to camp out. It's a large piece of land with woods on it, which is where we have the party for the haunted house, and then the actual haunted house, which is the house that the owner lives in and then starts dressing up for Halloween along with her family and friends. It's got a long driveway to the house that is surrounded by woods. Anyways, during that Halloween, since I'm good at sewing and making stuffed toys, it's a hobby of mine, I sometimes make stuffed props. This year, they wanted a stuffed Slender Man to stand in the house that people would run into. I love Slender Man. He's one of my favorite modern day made monsters, so I offered to make the stuffed prop. I also knew that some company made those full body suits. I decided that I could be lazy and ordered the Slender Man morph suit and stuff it to make the prop, since, let's face it, making a full body stuffing is hard and takes a lot of time. So, I got the morph suit and stuffed it, making a very large stuffed Slender Man, and I was quite proud of him. You can only imagine how hard it was to work with stretchy spandex fabric into the shape of a humanoid without it fighting you. I had to use some really stiff stuffing to keep its proper shape. I didn't want to mess up its shape, so I sat him in my passenger seat, which of course got a few looks on the road, but that's not the story. I got to the house, and everyone commented how good he looked and whatnot, and I set up my tent. I have a tent that's set up for one person, or maybe two small people, but since I'm tiny in stature, but wide, it fits me by myself pretty perfectly. After I set up my tent and started getting everything in order, I noticed I had forgotten my body pillow at home. As I said before, I'm not nicely shaped, and I sleep on my side, so I sleep with a body pillow to help me sleep better. It was too late for me to get home, so jokingly, one of my friends said, "Why don't you sleep with the stuffed Slender Man?" Now it seems weird, but damn it, I hate waking up hurting because I slept weirdly, and a body pillow helps me from doing so. I don't know why, it just does. So, I decided that that wasn't much of a bad idea. Of course, everyone thought it was hilarious as I went to my tent, dragging my largely stuffed Slender Man into my tiny little tent, like some dog with a huge stuffed toy trying to get through a doggy door. Yes, I know it looked silly, but I didn't care, because Slender Man was soft and stiff enough that I could use him as a decent body pillow for the night, until I could get my body pillow the next morning. I told you why my tent was small for a reason, and that was so you understand why I had to half sit up Slender Man, since he was too long to fit in the small dimensions of the tent, which made me pretty much sleep with my body wrapped around his lap and legs. Yes, it looked like I was sleeping in Slender Man's lap. And yes, to most people who knew it was in there, it looked ridiculous. One of my friends took a picture of it back then, but that photo's been long since lost due to me upgrading phones and her cleaning out her photos so she could take more pictures of her new grandbaby. Now, the tents were near each other, of course. If weather whips up, we can escape to the house. But we do the camping out because it's fun, as you would guess. I was next to the larger tent of one of my friends and her kids. That year I think there were about 6 tents and 1 motorhome. The families and close friends usually bunk together, but I'm the type that likes to have my own space. I have autism and anxiety problems, and after a certain amount of time with people, I need some space to decompress from being around others. Anyways, that's why I was in my own tent, and how Slender Man ended up in my tiny tent, with me wrapped around his legs and falling asleep. I woke up to a man screaming in horror, not from another tent, but right in front of me. I wore glasses, so all I could see was this blurry figure that was now screaming about monsters and running away from my open tent flap, which I had closed. I know I did. The screams of this man of course woke everyone else up, and some of the guys with us managed to catch and tackle him and hold him down while the police were called. I was of course in shock, as this scraggly, thin, wild-looking man continues to scream and cry like a maniac, and thrash around screaming about monsters coming to get him and whatnot. The police came out, and apparently this guy was a druggie that was high off his rocker, had seen the tents, and broke into mine because it was the smallest, though he never said why he broke in. Because he was high, and tripping of course, seeing a stuffed Slender Man, in his mind, must have been the real Slender Man sitting there waiting to attack him, hence why he began screaming and trying to escape. While in retrospect this is almost funny, I was damn frightened. Despite the fact the guy had been taken by the police, I dragged my stuffed Slender Man into my friend's tent and stayed in there with her and her kids the rest of the time we were there. Slender Man went on to scare a ton of kids and friends that came to the haunted house. He was a hit, but sadly, lost one of his legs to a very naughty chocolate lab of one of the house's haunted owners, and had to be disassembled, though I hope to one day remake him again, once I figure out a way to fix his leg properly. My friends and I were 11 and 12 back in 2010, and we lived in a small Canadian town. Danielle, Abby, and I usually hung out at this park close to their houses. A bit of backstory. Danielle's my best friend. Tommy lives across the street from her. His father, Bill, was good friends with my father. One day, the three of us girls went to the park, and upon arriving, Danielle was hesitant to stay, as there was a group of boys from school who were all 13 or 14. Abby and I were confused, but we agreed to stay away from them based on Danielle's reaction. We were talking and playing quietly to ourselves when one of the boys, there were about 4, Patrick, spoke up. "What are you ladies doing here?" Abby and I were immediately creeped out by this. The way he said it was so suggestive and sinister. The three of us had all developed early, so already being self-conscious about this didn't help. Danielle said, "Fuck off, Patrick," and we were kinda surprised at what she said, although happy she did. His friend Steven then spoke up. "That's not very nice." Patrick then got a bit closer to us, so we backed up. "What are you ladies scared of? We just think you're hot." I remember being 14, and I don't know if it's different with boys, but I don't remember ever thinking a 12-year-old was attractive in any way. "Hey you," Patrick said, looking at me. "I've seen you around school. Don't you ever wear a bra?" His friends laughed. At that age, I wore sports bras, as they were more practical for my age. Patrick continued, gesturing over to Abby. "She looks great in hers. Why don't you wear one?" I was so grossed out and embarrassed. "Shut the fuck up, Patrick! Don't speak to my friends like that," Danielle said to him. At this point, Abby and I were grateful for how ballsy she was. "Ah, come on. You're women now. Don't you know what you're ready to do now?" He then began grinding and humping the pole on a piece of playground equipment. We decided to walk away because of how grossed out we were. Patrick and his friends began following us, Patrick leading the group. "Come on, girls. We just want to have some fun. We started running, and Abby was last in the group. Her and I have asthma. Hers is a lot worse, so it was very hard for her. Patrick grabbed the back of her shirt, and I looked back in horror, scared as fuck as to what he was going to do. Abby was able to pull away from him, but he unhooked her bra in the process. Once we got away, we were all very upset and frightened. The next day, we decided to tell our principal. We told her everything, and Mrs. Anti-Confrontational decided that since we only knew Patrick and Stephen by name, and since it happened off of school property, and since no one was really hurt, Patrick would only be punished. His punishment? Write us all a letter expressing his apologies. Other than that, he was still allowed outside for recess, which he used to stare at us, or tell us, "They can't stop me from imagining," with his creepy-ass voice and smile. Danielle had told her parents, who then told Bill, her friend's father, and my dad's good friend. Abby and I didn't know until after, but Patrick was Bill's nephew, and had made other sexual advances towards Danielle at their cottage when she came with them. Bill then told Patrick that if he ever spoke to, touched, or even looked at any of us, he would knock his teeth out. For 3.5 years, I heard nothing from him. In May, right before the end of grade 10, I went to a co-op fair at our school. I had blocked out what had happened to us, and didn't remember it happening, until I saw him. Everything came flooding back, and I became extremely uncomfortable. I tried to avoid him, but at some point, he saw me. He came up behind me and placed a construction worker's hat on me from his job and said in my ear, "I didn't forget about you, you know." I turned around to see Patrick and his friend. They were just smiling. It was terrifying. I don't know how they recognized me, seeing as I myself had changed very much over the past 4 years. I didn't have them on Facebook or anything. Looking back at the way the park was set up, I remember there was a big shed in front of the tennis court at the back. There was a blind spot behind the shed, or even in the bushes. I don't want to know what he would have done if we hadn't have ran, or if Patrick had caught Abby. He's graduated now, and I don't know where he is. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. I want to thank everyone for sending in their submissions, and if you would like to share your own story, I'll have all the information in the description. I hope you all have an awesome weekend. I'll see you Monday for another video. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true.